Well, this is the Brett Allen Show. Thanks, everybody. We have a
That's where I got Allan from, damn it.
Yeah, we
Brett
have a
Allen.
special guest today. Actor Stephen Williams. My goodness, thanks for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me, as they say.
Yes, well, I have been going through your television and filmography, and you have been at this for a very long time. My goodness, you have played so many different characters. Um, of course, LA Heat, 21 Jump Street stands out to me, The Shy. Just so many different things. This is,
Yeah, Supernatural, X-Files, Yellowstone. Let's name all the iconic ones.
let's
I
do,
call
I
them the
mean, Friday
iconic
the,
ones.
yeah,
Blues Brothers, Friday the 13th. Yeah. It's been a blessing to be a part of. There's one thing about to be a journeyman actor, which is how I consider myself, and just do guest star roles in episodic television. It's another thing to be a part of these iconic kind of shows, those titles we just rattled off, and to be a recurring character in them, not just
yeah.
a guest star, to be a recurring character. So it has been a blessing. And I have been around for quite a long time due to the grace of God and my maker. Um, and I'm still working, you know, and it's one hell of a resume. It's one hell of a
It really
resume.
is. Like, I was looking through everything, and I was in my mind, I'm like, where do you start? Because as you just said, it is one thing to be on a series and to have multiple jobs, but to be on a series like you have done so many times and to be a reoccurring character and come back and have an actual story arc, that's a big deal.
It is.
Like that's what I think a lot of people that go to LA every year to become an actor or whatever to chase the dream, like you're part of a very small percentage, I feel, to have done this multiple times, which is a testament to your talent and the fact that people want to work with you, I think is a big deal too.
That's more than anything. I appreciate the fact that people want to work with me. I don't. I have no idea about the talent, but I do appreciate that people want to work with me, and I like to call it uh, my job history. Denzel and Samuel and Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, they have careers, quote unquote. I have a great job history. That's what I like to say, you know, because I think a career is an attitude. You know what I'm saying?
I
It's
do.
something that you're reaching for constantly. You're making that next step, that next rung up. That's what comprises a career. For me, it's just a great job history. I just want to get the rent paid, get some food on the table, some clothing on my back. And it's been working out for me.
Well, to quote one of your iconic characters, Quentin Dickinson off the off the Shy, you run shit.
That's one of my favorite lines. That is one of my favorite lines. But I had to.
Yeah, we've had
What do
several
you do?
cast members
I'm
over the years from that show, but you really sort of you championed that show and got you're part of the first season or so. It's true, like you've just done so many things. Like you've worked with legends, and I really like. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that, and it's not a surprising thing, but like literally when I get somebody the privilege to chat with an actor, you look at their resume and you go, okay, there's standout things, but as you said, just mentioning the iconic ones, my goodness, how long have you been doing it? When did you start? It's
I,
been
if I remember correctly, I started in the 70s. It was definitely the 70s. There's a whole long story behind that. I had just gotten out of the Army in 68, and I worked at the post office for about a year in Chicago. a grueling place to work as a postal worker. Um, and it was a great job. I mean, that is the quintessential job for a young African American, particularly because it's a federal position. And, just coming out of the Army, it was almost automatic that I would get it if I applied for it. So it's
Right.
a federal position with plenty of benefits. And at one point, a buddy of mine, God rest his soul now, he's gone on. He was the first Black guy to be on staff at Playboy magazine as a photographer. And he was working on the north side of Chicago in retail. And at one point, he asked me if I wanted to come over and work in the store with him. And I went, yeah, it sounds like fun. Now, the north side of Chicago was a melting pot. All right. We know that Chicago back then, and even now, I think, is still one of the most demographically segregated cities in the United States.
Yeah.
So it was a place where a young project kid got to go mix and deal with other cultures and other races. And I quit my job at the post office and went to work in this clothing industry at this little boutique. People thought I was out of my mind. I mean, I gave up the quintessential, African American, or for anybody, federal job to go work for probably half the money. I don't even remember what the money was. Probably half the money that I was making at the post office to go work in this, this industry. Well, as it turned out, I kept working in the industry to shorten the story a little bit. And I ended up working on Michigan Avenue. Michigan Avenue is sort of the equivalent to Rodeo Drive here in LA. It's the upper, shopping. And a lot of my clients and I was in female apparel at that time, shoe salesman / clothing salesman. And a lot of my clients were a lot of models would come in to buy clothing and shoes, and a lot of female ad executives. And they kept suggesting that I had the physique to be a model. Well, by this time, my buddy had become this photographer at Playboy. And it's in my biography, Brett. It's in
It
my
really is.
biography.
No, I
I
know.
put it in my
You're
first biography. People guys, how did you get into acting? Why did you get into acting? And actually, in my biography, I wrote to get laid. I wrote it to get laid. I've got all these beautiful women coming in telling me, hey, man, you got the physique to be a model. And I thought, well, shit, why don't I just give it an attempt? And maybe I can get laid. So my buddy we did a portfolio, a bunch of pictures. And I hit the streets of Chicago and started making a living as a model. This was around 1972-ish, somewhere between 72 and 74. And at one point, I remember this guy coming into the clothing store and asking me if I acted. He was part of the Deerfield Community Theater at Deerfield, Illinois. And I went, yeah, sure. I'd never acted a day in my life, I don't think. And I did this play for him, this community theater play called Slow Dance on the Killing Ground. It was a 3-character, 3-hour play that had been truncated to about 2.5 hours. And the guy who was playing my role had fallen out. I only had 2 weeks of rehearsal for this play. And I went and did this play. And I got good reviews.
mm,
And that's when I discovered that perhaps I had some talent for acting. As a matter of fact, I'll always remember the last line of the review said, "We will surely see Stephen Williams in theater again." And from that point, it started to snowball. I continued to work as a model. Hollywood came to Chicago, i.e., Blues Brothers, i.e., Cooley High, Risky Business, da da da. And I come up with that in that era with my ex-wife. The Getty's agency represented the entire Cusack family, John and his dad and his sisters. And I came up with in that era with, Joey Mantegna and Gary Sinise and John Malkovich and all of these guys, all these Chicago guys, these great Chicago guys, the Meshack Taylors and the Lonnie Smiths who have gone on. God rest their souls. And I called my acting training on-the-job training. I mean, the first big show I did was at Goodman Theater. I know we've heard of Goodman Theater if you know Chicago theater. And I'm on stage with Robert Guillaume. Okay. So, and again, things just kept snowballing until finally Blues Brothers brought me to Hollywood. where I met Stephen J. Cannell. I have to mention him. He kept me working. I loved him with a passion. Um, and the rest, as they say, is being history. You know, I've just continued to be fortunate enough to continue to work. You know, and even the shows, even now, I've got resentment for some shows that I didn't do. Like an original cast member of The Equalizer. The show The Equalizer was myself, Robert Lansing, and Edward Woodward. And we were contracted to do 14 shows, 14 episodes. They shot in New York. They relocated everyone but me. They would fly me back and forth. And at one point, about my seventh show, somebody decided, why are we flying Stephen back and forth? Big per diem, first class hotel, first class flights, nice salary. Why don't we cast this out of New York? So they released me after the seventh show, had to pay me for all 14. And 2 weeks later, I got the call for Jump Street.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was one of those things where one of the few times I've been released from a show, but it always ended up better. And of course, Jump Street became iconic, and I got a good 5 years out of that. Um, and it's been going on ever since. I mean, I work, I've learned, you know, like I said, OJT, on the job training from on stage. I think that's where an actor really gets his chops, is being on stage. And I had the opportunity to be on stage with a lot of really, really good people. The Black Ensemble Theater in Chicago. Uh, we had a little children's theater for a while I worked with a guy named Rudolph Monroe and Sanders Wilson called Earth Productions, where this four-person cast would go do, we did Peter Pan and Captain Hook, and we would go into schools, Boy Scout, Girl Scout camps, hospitals, anywhere we could find children and do these shows. And the four of us played multiple characters. I think in one show it was four of us playing 16 characters.
Wow.
Uh, so all of that stuff was great training, great fun, and now it's turned out to be a comfortable living.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, we've talked about so many things just in this little bit so far. Now, you're one of these actors who you got your start in Chicago, and you've also been a part of a lot of Chicago type shows. You've even as of recent Chicago PD, like these types of shows, The Shy, where a lot of actors, have come across multiple series, multiple sets. When you do that, we've had a few people on who have done this where they show up in The Shy and then they show up on Chicago PD, Chicago Med. It's fun to see all of you come across. When you get booked for these types of Chicago shows, I'm assuming at this point it's because they know who you are. And is it a matter of a phone call to you saying, hey, we would like you to be on the show? Like, let's talk about The Shy. How did you book that role? Because it was when the show first started and has now continued on to be a huge success.
Yeah, it's really funny because I've asked myself that question a couple of times. I don't remember whether I auditioned for that show or whether it was offered. I do believe it was offered. I do believe it was offered. I think somebody knew me from somewhere. And a lot of these shows have come from producers recommending me. Like, for instance, The X-Files. I think I was recommended from by, we call them the Wong brothers, James Wong and Jesus Christ. I hope you don't watch this podcast. Hope everybody watches your podcast, but I've forgotten the name. But two of my producers, and Stephen and Steve Beers and Patrick Hasberg, they recommended me for X-Files.
Okay.
Um, that's how I got that. A lot of that comes out of having worked with a group who have moved on to another show, and they have said, hey, we've got this guy that would fit, a certain role in the current show they were working in. So a lot of it's come out of that, and a great deal of it's come out of auditions. And for me, auditions are so different now. I mean, I've lived through the change.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
going to ask you
you know,
about
the
that. You okay?
Yeah, the after COVID thing. The beforehand, I was used to walking into a room, all the decision makers were there, writers, directors, producers, blah blah blah, casting people. I walk into a room, I'm looking at 5 or 6 people, maybe 7 people, and I'm doing my thing, And it was so cool because I've always said that way you can show so many different personalities. You walk in the room as a funny man, a clown, or whatever the hell, and bam, you can switch over to the bad guy or to the sick guy or to whatever role they wanted you to play. And they got to see that you had the ability to have a range,
Mm.
you know. Nowadays, they're having us do all the work for them, so to speak. I mean, it takes a lot of old timers off. Let's just face it, we're making mini movies, you know. Actors are having to buy equipment and set up their lights and get backdrops and and do this audition that they send out on film. And like I said, I'm a total mechanical, electronic void, just a void. I'm still learning how to turn my telephone on and off. So it's very difficult for me to deal in this computer world um, with auditions. Um, but I've reached that point where no ego intended. I just think my resume is large enough that I should not have to audition for a lot of stuff. You know what I can do. And the real work happens on stage with your fellow actor, with a good director. That's where it happens at. There's something. I've become a lousy auditioner, quite frankly. I really I can't put stuff on film the way a lot of these young people are. The young people, the new ones, they're used to it. That's what they were, born with. Uh, so yeah, it's quite the change. COVID changed quite a bit, you know. Um, and I hate that, with this film and stuff, you only get to see that one side of me that I can display. I can only display that character you just sent me the sides for. I need to put a couple of takes down of that character, and you don't really get to see Stephen Williams, the person. You need to see that person too. I think for directors, so you know who you're working with.
Yeah.
That's a big part of this business to me, is to know the kind of personality that you're working with, know how to draw out the best performance in them. I'm very proud of, as an example, I'm very proud of my work in The Shy, the first season. I think Q kind of took over that first season. I think that's why you didn't see him for a long time, because that show was supposed to be about the coming of age of those children. And I asked Lena once, if anybody asked me for a sound bite, what should I say? And that was what she passed on to me. She said that it's about the coming of age of these kids, how they become doctors, lawyers, carpenters, killers, drug addicts, whatever they become. But I say all that to say that I attribute a great deal of my work in The Shy to a director slash producer who, again, has unfortunately gone on, David Rodriguez.
Mm.
David kept me so centered, so right there with my character. He never let me go over the top. He never let me be too low. He was just a fabulous director because he directed a great deal of my episodes, and helped me establish that character, because we knew each other. We hung out together. You know what I'm saying? He would give these parties and mix the cast of Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and I was a piece of that because of Chicago PD. I didn't even know. It's really funny. This is funny. So I go and do a Chicago PD, right? Now, first of all, I didn't
Bishop,
know,
right?
huh?
You play Bishop in Chicago. Yeah, I remember you in
Yeah, I played an FBI guy that was a friend of uh,
Voight.
not Voight, Voight's partner.
Oh, Elias. Yeah,
Yes, Elias, right,
yeah.
right. I'm
Jason's
Elias,
been
I'm
on
a
the show
contact,
several times. But yeah, you
right,
were a friend of Elias's character.
right,
Yeah.
and an FBI guy or CIA guy, FBI guy, I think. Uh, and I didn't realize at that time, I didn't realize that that was a Dick Wolf show also,
Yeah.
right? So we do this scene. My scene is with Eliza, and I have one with John, with Voight, um, Jason. And later on, like weeks later, we were at a club in Chicago, and David introduced Jason and I. And I don't know if Jason realized it, but at the moment, I had forgotten that we had already met, that I had actually done a scene with him, you know? I mean, we get so caught up sometimes in our work and our scene, and we just caught up in this character that we had met each other as if we were meeting for the first time. But I had already met him. And what a great cast! I think that that's the best cast on television.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite shows. Chicago PD. It is one of my absolute favorite shows, and I think they are probably the best cast on television. And for me, that's my
I
favorite.
would agree with
Put
you.
it that
We've
way.
had so many cast members from that show and Fire and Med over the years. It's funny when I developed that relationship with NBC and their team. Um, Honestly, like I will say yes to them anytime they send me somebody because it's such a good show. Well, you mentioned
Yeah,
something interesting, Stephen, about I mean, kind of joked a little bit at the beginning, but at this stage in the game for you as an actor and journeyman and storyteller, what is important to you to say yes to? Like, what are you looking at when you say you don't either you have to audition or like you get offered a part? What's important to you as an actor to say yes at this point?
I think that first of all, what's respect is important to me. I've been in this business a long time, and I do good work. I do solid work. Um, and I think I've earned that offer of slot that
Yes.
make me an offer. I think I've earned that, particularly when it comes to guest star roles. Um, I have said to my people, quote unquote, and again, no ego intended. I just think I've earned it that I don't want to audition for guest star roles, but I will certainly audition for recurring roles, and I will audition for series regular roles.
Mm,
It's just a position that I think I've earned. What I'm looking for lack of a better way to say it, is being able to relate to the words in the script.
mm.
If I can, and there's something innately I think that actors do where they can automatically relate to the words, automatically relate to the situation, automatically relate to the emotions involved in this scene, in this script. Those are the things that I don't know that I look for them, but those are the things that hit me when I'm looking at a role. Um, and of course, with this is a business, man. This is how I pay my rent, buy my food, blah, 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 blah. So
Right.
I'm also looking for a nice offer. I'm also looking for a decent paycheck. I don't work for free. I'm still, in my opinion, on a very low level of what the industry pays me relative to my longevity and my track record.
Yes.
And I'm trying to mince. I don't know if I'm mincing words. I don't want to burn no bridges or
No, no, I get it. It makes perfect
make
sense.
anybody
It's your
angry, but
career, it's your well-being, it's your job.
yeah, it's my job, and that's how I consider it. Again, not a career, but a job. Um, I heard Ron Howard, I think it was, who said this about actors who may be struggling or the new actors coming up or what we can look forward to or how to do it. And he said, just be too good for them to ignore. Because everybody wants good people in their projects. They want their projects to come off well. And I think Ron was the one who said it. He
Yeah,
said,
he did say
doing
that.
your job, he said, just be too good for them to ignore. And I think that's what I've been, is good enough for them not to ignore. And I, again, I think I'm great to work with. I've had a situation recently. You may hit on it. If you ask me a question, I'll answer it honestly. But for the most part, I think I'm a great guy. People have said I'm a fun guy to work with, and I am. I think I like to have fun at work. A lot of actors take their shit much too seriously, you know, much too serious. This is a job, man. This is pretend. This is, let's go have some fun. I think you do much better work when you're having fun with your fellow actors and you like your fellow actors and you're really, communicating with them and letting them know how you work, you know. Um, like no surprises. Let's collaborate. It's such a collaborative business too. A lot of actors, directors, we tend to get the most accolades, but we've got the sound people and the makeup people and the wardrobe people and the dolly pushers and the electricians and the grips. I mean, we've got all of these people that make up this great team. And that's what makes it, it's all the ingredients in the recipe that makes a good cake or a good pie. You know, you've got to have the right amount of eggs and the right amount of flour and butter and stuff to come up with a good cake. And when you've got a group of people that tend to be what a lot of them say, you've heard that term, we're family,
Yes.
you know, and when that happens in a cast, it really shows. And there is a such thing as chemistry. There's certain chemistries that are just magical, you know. I loved, for instance, David and Jillian in the X Files. These were two very, when I'm with my friends, I say these were the dullest people on the planet. On this show, I will say they were low key, but that chemistry worked like magic. You know, these two very low key people had magical chemistry. I think for the first couple of seasons, our Jump Street cast was because that was a very socially relevant show. I don't know
Yes.
if people, the big thing was Johnny Depp and Richard Grieco and blah, blah, blah. But if you watch that show, it was very socially relevant. We addressed so many social issues: teen pregnancy, child rape, teen abuse, blah, blah, blah. And we were good. I thought those kids, and they were all kids at the time. I think Johnny was the grownest at 26 when we started. Dustin was only 22, but Holly and Peter were barely out of their teens. Um, and it worked for us because we shot the show in British Columbia in Vancouver, and nobody knew anybody there. So we tended to hang out together for that first couple of seasons until we got to know people, in Vancouver and got our own little niches going. We tended to hang out together, and I, in my opinion, that helped that show quite a bit. Just that camaraderie ship among those people. But yeah, just the relating to the words is what I'm looking for in terms of a role and a decent paycheck.
Yeah. When I started doing this show and talking to high level people like yourself, once I was able to earn that and get yeses and really delve into this industry and the actor's journey, it was interesting to me to learn that there are so many different things. And if the actor strike taught us anything, like there's a very specific proclivity to somebody like yourself who, when they look at roles, like there are things that, yes, I will audition for. Noah Wiley taught me this. He's like, yeah, like for me right now, does it shoot in LA? Number one. Number two, is it going to be a financially smart decision for me to choose? Because he said something very similar, Stephen, in the fact that like he will audition for certain things, but other things, it just has to be a straight offer. And he said that straight up. And I think that's okay because you've earned it. It's like we want a Stephen Williams type. Well, I'm right here. Like, pick
Yeah,
me. You
I
know what
haven't
I'm
gone
saying?
anywhere.
Well, I
And I
haven't
still
got.
put it, and I still look a little bit like me from the old
You
days.
do. You
Old,
look
old ass man.
exactly.
And And that's no way you go either, but I got a mirror, man. I got a mirror. And I need to go,
You've got the
damn.
Captain Fuller look, or the LA Heat look. It's interesting. Or the Hill Street Blues, or the, like
It's so
what's
cool that you're hip to LA Heat too, by the way. But go
Oh,
ahead.
I will tell you what, like I have a 10-year-old son. So, couple things. I turned 50 in on Friday, and I have a 10-year-old son, and we are in this world now where I am slowly starting to be able to introduce him to certain shows, right? So we watched the Dukes of Hazzard the other night, which which he has seen a few episodes that we're kind of careful about what I let him watch, but like certain shows he's seen, he loves the Rush Hour films. Like he thinks Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker are hilarious. And we've seen a few episodes of the Dukes of Hazzard in which you show up in a couple episodes, which led to me reaching out to your team, who I've worked with on other things, and saying, "Hey, does Mr. Williams, does he do interviews? Would he be open to it?" And so my point in all of this is like I'm very familiar, like L.A. Law, uh, you know,
Yeah.
LA Heat, like all of these shows, I grew up on them. Back then, my parents watching TV as a kid was a little bit different. We had a little bit looser standards as far as like what we were okay to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm familiar with all of these things that you've done. And so to be able to talk to you, and I joke about the Stephen Williams type, I've heard that from other actors, and they all say, I'm still here, like I haven't gone anywhere. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
a blessing. It is a
some of these
blessing.
things, in this age of remakes and reboots, um, I'm happy that those few shows that they haven't. I know you did the 22 Jump Street, you reprised your role kind of a little bit. Um,
No, I didn't.
so you were
That's
mentioned right in the story, I
I
thought.
don't know. I saw the first one. You're talking about the movies.
Yeah, the movies. For some reason, I thought you had
Nope.
something to do with it. Okay.
They may have mentioned my name or character, but they didn't ask me to walk through not one frame. I'm still resentful. How the
It's
hell
probably
do
for the
you
best,
do
honestly,
21
sir.
Jump Street and not ask Captain Fun? I think Johnny and Peter, I know, did a cameo in it. Um, and they both get killed in the movie, as a matter of fact. And somebody said to me once, that was Johnny thumbing his thumb at the movie, that it was dead to him. That's what I heard. I just heard I
Yeah,
heard the
I mean, it's
rumor.
probably better that you didn't. I mean, because
I
you've
don't know.
created such iconic characters. I want to ask you a couple more questions here, and then I know I don't want to keep you too long,
Oh,
but
no problem.
um I want to be respectful of your time. So when you work on these, we're talking about this generation now of film and TV and how things are made and how people audition. It's so different. Like I've heard stories where when you would go into a room, there would be you, Mr. Williams, and like 10 other people that look like you, and then maybe an oddball or two, but like you would go in and your goal was to book the room, and you may have even booked the job while other people are out there waiting to audition, like the deals being negotiated while you're in the room sometimes. Do people ask you for advice? Do younger actors ask you for advice? And if they do, like what would you tell somebody coming to LA today for the first time, looking to make this idea and this dream a reality? Like what is your advice?
I first of all, it's hard for me to presume to give anybody any advice. You have to understand that um, I didn't choose this business.
It chose
This
you.
business, yeah, it chose me. Literally,
It
God
really
dropped
did.
it dropped in my lap. It dropped in my lap, and my maker gave me the ability to handle what was dropped in my lap.
I love that.
I learned that I had, some talent to do it. So that's developing all the time. But what I would tell the very young people, one thing that I have told the very young people, learn to read. because I have dealt in a world where a lot of young actors were struggling just with that educational process of
Mm,
that learning to read, being a good reader. That's what we do. That's where it starts for us as an actor. You've got to be able to read that script. Okay? If you are having trouble reading, then you're gonna have trouble interpreting a role, etc., and etc. The second thing is have fun. Don't
mm.
burn any bridges. Remember that the guy who's running to get your coffee one day may be the head writer, which did happen in LA Heat.
Yeah.
Our head writer the second season was one of the fucking PAs the first season. Turned out to be our head writer. So don't burn any bridges. Remember that you are a professional. Don't get a big head. Don't believe your PR. A lot of this business is perception.
Mm,
Don't get caught up in your own perception. You know what I'm saying? Um,
yes.
and just have I tended to be one of the things people will say about me is it never looked like I cared. I tended to be very relaxed. Um, I was fortunate enough not to ever, when I started modeling and acting, I never had another job. I never had a supplemental job. I never had to do anything but act and model. That makes a big difference when you are that kind of relaxed, when
Mm,
you're not worried about where that next dime is coming from relative to your mortgage or relative to your meal. I never had to worry about that. I was blessed that way. That makes a world of difference because we like to say sometimes us actors, the room can feel desperation. And desperation is not something you want to take into an audition room. You want to be as relaxed as possible and have as much fun as possible. Be as creative as you can, you know, listen to whoever. I I like to ask, and I don't know if I'm segueing off the subject, but I mean, those are little pieces of advice, and these are little pieces of advice. If the writer is in the room, the one question I used to like to ask the writer is, what was your intentions when you wrote this?
wow.
When you sat down and wrote this, what were you envisioning? You know, that's what I want to give back first, is what that writer had in mind. Um, and then we can move on to what the director has in mind. And then we move on to what I've got in mind. I think those are the three entities that absolutely have to be on the same page, uh, but they could be coming from different directions to get to the same point. It's like taking different roads to get to the same point, but you've got to all be heading for that one destination. You can't all be looking for something different. You know, me, the director and the writer, we've got to decide where we want to go. And we just had to decide if you're going to take a train, if I'm going to take a bus, or if I'm going to fly in. You know, but we're going to all end up at the same spot. Uh, so I say that to young actors. Cooperation goes a long way. Creativity, niceness goes a long way, you know, and do your craft. Do it as many ways as you want. You know, like I said, I've never had an acting lesson in my life. Some people went to Juilliard. Some people studied Stanislavski. Some people studied, what was her name? The great Uta Hagen, I think. You know, all of these, there's so many different principles and ways to get there. Find your lane. Let me put it that way. Find your lane and stay the fuck in it.
I love it. You run shit, as we said at the
I run
beginning.
shit.
That's such a classic moment between you and Jacob. And
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen that character more, but I think, as shows evolve and storylines evolve, and I think, it's a whole nother conversation for a different time. But
Another, yeah, because they did bring him back. You're aware that they did bring him
yeah,
back, only
yeah,
to kill him.
so
Um,
sad. Ugh,
uh,
I've
and that, quite frankly, was not a that was not a good situation. That turned out to be a political situation. It wasn't an actor situation. It would have broke my heart if I was, killed or taken off because they weren't satisfied with my acting. But it turned out to be a political situation. I'm old school, and there's a new world out there, and a new attitude within the industry
yes,
about
I remember
about
that
yeah
whole thing.
about certain things that
Yeah,
you know that just don't work for a lot of us old guys. A lot of us old guys are like we're a little bit set in our ways, and we want to have fun, and we're not offended by minor shit. And a lot of people are offended. Their sense of entitlement is a little overboard.
yeah, I agree with you. That was
So yeah.
yeah, it was that is a an understatement for sure. Well, Mr. Williams, I want to say thank you. This has been an honor. Like, again, just the decades of career you've had and the impact on the industry, the impact on people, the culture, the political culture. I mean, really, just all of these characters from tip to tail have really just been phenomenal. And I thank you for your time. I really do.
Well,
This
I
has been a
thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you for giving me the time. And I would like to thank all of the audience members, all the fans who've ever seen me in anything, who've ever watched me on a continuing basis and appreciated my work. Thank you very much. And for all the young actors who've walked up and said, "Hey, man, you are the OG. We patterned ourselves after you." I mean, I've had some wonderful things said to me, Brett. I mean, when you get a kid who walks up to you and say, "I came to Hollywood because of you," or "I got into the business because of you," or "I learned to deal with certain situations because of you," it is humbling. It is humbling. So I would just like to thank all of the people who have ever done that, who have ever thought positive thoughts about me. I thank you for that. And I ask you to continue because I think that positive energy is very powerful, very powerful. So, like that, folks. Keep sending me positive energy. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.